The evening light filtered through the tall windows of Blue Harbor Restaurant, casting a golden glow on the polished wooden floors. Amelia stood by the service station, tucking loose strands of hair back into her bun while balancing a tray of empty glasses. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before, though they were meant for a different kind of movement altogether. "Table 12 needs their check," the head waiter called out, barely looking up from the reservation book. "On it," Amelia replied, her voice betraying the fatigue of someone 8 hours into a double shift. The restaurant hummed with the pleasant buzz of conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. In the corner sat a magnificent grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the chandelier lights above. Currently it was silent. The evening's musician had called in sick. Every time Amelia walked past it, her heart tugged just a little. 3 years ago, she had been a promising piano student at the city's most prestigious music academy. Now at 26, she served overpriced meals to people who made more money in a day than she did in months. Life had a way of rewriting your story when you least expected it. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked a middle-aged couple finishing their dessert. The woman shook her head. "Just the check, please." As Amelia moved through the dining room, her eyes kept drifting toward the piano. Sometimes during slow afternoons, she would imagine walking over, sitting down on the bench and letting her fingers remember what they were truly made for. But she never did. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who hadn't watched her mother fall ill. Someone who hadn't dropped everything to care for her. Someone whose savings hadn't disappeared into medical bills and rent. "You're staring again," Leeway said, appearing beside her with a stack of folded napkins. As the only other server who knew about her past, he was the closest thing to a friend she had at Blue Harbor. "Was not," she replied automatically, though they both knew it was a lie. "When was the last time you played?" he asked, his voice gentle. Amelia shrugged. 8 months, maybe. My neighbor moved out and took her keyboard. Couldn't afford to buy my own. The truth was, it had been longer. Even when she had access to a piano, something held her back. Perhaps it was the pain of remembering what could have been, or the fear that her talent had withered away during the long months of absence. Leeway looked like he wanted to say more, but the front doors opened and everything in the restaurant shifted. The manager straightened his tie, servers stood taller, and even the kitchen noise seemed to quiet down. "What's happening?" Amelia whispered. "It's him," Leeway murmured back. "The tech billionaire. Jackson Williams." Amelia had heard the name before, everyone had. The founder of Horizon Technologies, worth billions at just 34 years old, known for his brilliance, his demanding nature, and his unpredictability. He reserved the private dining room for tonight, Leeway continued. Marissa was supposed to serve them, but she just called in sick. A cold feeling settled in Amelia's stomach. "Please don't tell me." "Welcome to the big leagues," Leeway said with a sympathetic smile. "The manager asked for you specifically, said you're the most professional." "That's just code for least likely to make a scene if someone's rude to her," Amelia muttered. The manager approached, his face a mask of professional calm, though his eyes betrayed anxiety. "Amelia, you're taking the private room tonight. Mr. Williams has a party of 8. They've ordered the chef's tasting menu with wine pairings. Just keep everything flowing smoothly, and whatever they ask for, the answer is yes." "Got it," she said, smoothing down her black apron. Tips from a table like this could cover half her rent. She couldn't afford to mess this up. The private dining room was separated from the main area by frosted glass doors. When Amelia entered, she was struck by the energy in the room. 8 people engaged in animated conversation, with Jackson Williams at the head of the table. He wasn't what she expected. In photos, he always looked severe. But in person, there was something almost boyish about his enthusiasm as he gestured while making a point. "Good evening," Amelia said, summoning her most professional voice. "I'm Amelia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Williams looked up, his intense gaze landing on her for just a moment before he nodded and returned to his conversation. The others barely acknowledged her, typical for guests of this caliber. They lived in a different world, one where people like Amelia were practically invisible. The dinner service began smoothly. Amelia moved efficiently between the private room and the kitchen, bringing course after course of artfully plated food and perfectly paired wines. The conversation at the table flowed from business to politics to technology, with Williams often at the center, though Amelia noticed he sometimes seemed distracted. his attention drifting toward the main dining room. It was during the fourth course that everything changed. Williams suddenly stopped mid-sentence and looked directly at Amelia as she poured wine. "The piano out there," he said. "Why isn't anyone playing it tonight?" The question caught her off guard. "The pianist called in sick, sir." "Shame," he said, swirling his wine. "I specifically chose this restaurant because I read about the live music." One of his guests, a woman in an expensive silk blouse, touched his arm. "We can have music at the after-party, Jackson. The string quartet is already booked." He shook his head. "It's not the same. I wanted to hear piano tonight." His tone carried the slight petulance of someone used to getting exactly what they wanted. Amelia nodded politely and continued her duties, hoping the matter was closed. But throughout the next course, she noticed Williams becoming increasingly agitated, checking his watch, his attention wandering. When she returned with dessert, Williams stopped her again. "Does anyone else on staff play piano? Even just basic background music would be better than nothing." "I'm not sure, sir," Amelia replied. "I can ask the manager if you'd like." "Please do," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request but a command. As Amelia hurried to find the manager, her heart raced. Part of her wanted to confess that she could play, far better than basic background music. But the thought of touching those keys again, especially in front of someone like Williams, sent a wave of panic through her. The manager was apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, but we don't have anyone available who plays piano tonight." Williams frowned, clearly disappointed. The rest of the dinner proceeded with a subtle tension in the air. When it came time for coffee, Williams declined and announced to his party that they would be moving on to the next venue earlier than planned. As Amelia brought the check, disaster struck. Another server bumped into her from behind, sending her slightly off balance. The coffee pot in her hand tilted, and a splash of hot liquid landed on Williams' sleeve. "I'm so sorry," Amelia gasped, immediately grabbing napkins. The table fell silent. Williams looked down at his stained cuff, then back up at Amelia, his expression unreadable. "It's just coffee," one of his companions said, trying to break the tension. But Williams kept his eyes on Amelia. "This is an interesting evening," he said finally. "No piano music is promised, and now coffee on my favorite shirt." "I'm truly sorry, sir," she said again, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. This could cost her the job she desperately needed. What happened next was so unexpected that Amelia would later wonder if she had imagined it. Williams's gaze drifted to her hands as she clutched the napkins, and something changed in his expression. "Your hands," he said quietly. "Those are a pianist's hands." Amelia froze. How could he possibly know? Was it the slight calluses on her fingertips or the particular way she held her fingers? Habits that years of playing had ingrained. She began but couldn't find the words to continue. "You play, don't you?" Williams asked, his tone now curious rather than angry. The other guests at the table were watching the exchange with interest. Amelia felt trapped, exposed in a way that made her deeply uncomfortable. "I used to," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Williams leaned back in his chair, studying her with newfound interest. "How fascinating," he said. "The restaurant couldn't provide a pianist, yet they've had one serving us all evening." One of his business associates laughed. "Jackson, leave the poor girl alone. She's here to serve dinner, not perform." But Williams ignored him, his focus entirely on Amelia. "I think I know how you can make up for my ruined shirt," he said, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. And with those words, Amelia knew her carefully constructed routine was about to be shattered. The past she had been running from was suddenly rushing toward her, brought back to life by an accidental coffee spill, and the whim of a man who was used to getting exactly what he wanted. The private dining room had fallen completely silent. Amelia could feel every pair of eyes on her, watching, waiting. Her throat went dry as she realized what Jackson Williams was implying. "I don't think that would be appropriate," she said quietly, trying to maintain her professional composure. "I haven't played in a very long time." Williams tilted his head slightly. "How long is very long?" "Almost a year," she admitted, though it felt like a lifetime. One of the women at the table, dressed in a sleek black dress with a statement necklace, leaned forward. "Jackson, you can't seriously expect a server to perform for us." But Williams wasn't looking at his companion. His eyes remained fixed on Amelia, studying her with an intensity that made her want to step back. "A year isn't so long," he said. Not for someone who's truly dedicated to their craft. There was something challenging in his tone, almost as if he was daring her. The manager appeared in the doorway, clearly sensing that something unusual was happening. "Is everything all right in here?" he asked, his gaze darting between Amelia and Williams. Williams smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "Everything's fine, Thomas. I was just asking Amelia here if she might play something on your beautiful piano, since your regular musician is absent tonight." The manager's eyes widened slightly. "Amelia?" he asked, sounding confused. She wanted to disappear. This wasn't how anyone was supposed to find out. Her music had become something private, something she kept tucked away like a pressed flower between the pages of a book, a memory of something once beautiful, but now fragile and faded. "I don't think," she began, but Williams cut her off. "I'll make it worth your while," he said. $5,000 for one song." A collective gasp went around the table. The manager's mouth fell open. Amelia felt as though she might pass out. $5,000 was more than 2 months' rent. It was breathing room she hadn't had in years. It was the possibility of a future beyond double shifts and aching feet. "That's very generous." She tried again. 10,000, Williams said, his voice calm as if he were discussing the weather, rather than an amount of money that could change her life. The business associate to his right cleared his throat. "Jackson, this is excessive." Williams shrugged. "I've paid more for less meaningful experiences." He pulled out his phone. "One song, $10,000 transferred to you immediately." Amelia's mind raced. What was driving this man's obsession? Was it just the entitlement of the ultra-wealthy? The belief that everything and everyone had a price? Or was there something else, something she couldn't see? "Why?" she asked, finally finding her voice. "Why is this so important to you?" For a moment, something flickered across Williams' face, something almost vulnerable, before his confident mask returned. "Let's just say I recognize talent when I see it, even when it's hiding in plain sight. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I've had a rather boring evening, and I suspect you're about to make it interesting." Amelia looked to her manager, hoping for some intervention, but he just gave a slight nod, his eyes communicating what his words didn't. "This could be good for the restaurant. This could be good for you." "One song," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just one." William's face broke into a genuine smile for the first time that evening. "Excellent." He turned to the manager. "Thomas, I think we'll take our coffee in the main dining room after all." The next few minutes passed in a blur. The party moved from the private room to a prime table near the piano. The other diners in the restaurant watched with curious glances as Williams's group settled in, an air of expectation hanging over them. Word spread quickly among the staff. The server was going to play the piano for the billionaire. Li Wei caught her by the arm as she passed the service station. "What's happening?" he asked, his eyes wide with concern. "I think I'm about to make a huge mistake," Amelia replied, her voice shaking slightly. "Or maybe," he said, squeezing her hand, "you're about to remind yourself who you really are." As Amelia approached the piano, she felt as though she were walking through water, every step requiring effort against the current of her fear. The magnificent grand piano gleamed under the soft lighting, its lid propped open like a giant black wing. She had avoided looking at it directly for months, and now she was about to sit before it, to touch it, to attempt to coax music from it and from herself. She sat down on the bench, adjusting it slightly out of habit. The restaurant had grown quieter, though not completely silent. Most patrons continued their conversations, unaware of the drama unfolding, while others watched with mild curiosity. Williams and his party, however, were fully attentive, waiting. Amelia placed her hands on the keys without pressing them, feeling the cool, smooth ivory beneath her fingertips. The sensation was so familiar it made her chest ache with a sudden sharp nostalgia. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. What should she play? Classical would be safest, Chopin or Debussy perhaps. But as she sat there, another melody rose in her mind, one she had composed herself during those dark months after her mother's diagnosis. When music had been her only solace, she began to play hesitantly at first. A simple, melancholy progression in a minor key. Her fingers felt stiff, unpracticed, and she winced at a wrong note. But then muscle memory began to take over. The piece was her own, after all. There was no correct way to play it except the way it flowed from her heart. The melody gained confidence, building from its simple beginning into something more complex. It was a song about loss, about doors closing and dreams deferred, but also about resilience, finding beauty in unexpected places. As she played, Amelia felt something unlock inside her, a door she had closed long ago creaking open. She forgot about Williams and his $10,000. She forgot about the restaurant and the watching eyes. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was simply a musician again, speaking the only language that had ever made complete sense to her. The middle section of the piece quickened, her left hand providing a driving rhythm while her right danced above it. This part had always reminded her of running. Not running away from something, but running towards something, heart pounding with anticipation rather than fear. Her body swayed slightly with the music's momentum. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice how the restaurant had gradually fallen silent around her. Conversations had ceased. Even the kitchen staff had paused their work, standing in the doorway to listen. William sat motionless, his coffee untouched before him, his eyes never leaving her hands. The piece began its final movement, returning to the opening theme but transformed now. The same notes but with a different quality, as if seen through a new lens. The melody became simpler again, resolving its tensions, finding its way home. Amelia's fingers played the final chord, letting it ring and fade naturally into silence. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. The spell she had cast lingered in the air. Then someone began to clap, and suddenly the whole restaurant erupted in applause. Amelia opened her eyes, startled as if waking from a dream. Her cheeks flushed as she realized what had happened. She had forgotten herself entirely in the music. She rose from the bench on unsteady legs, giving an awkward little bow before turning to walk away. But Jackson Williams was suddenly there, blocking her path, his expression unreadable. "What was that?" he asked, his voice unusually soft. "Just something I wrote a while ago," she replied, looking down. "It doesn't have a name. You composed that?" The surprise in his voice made her look up. His eyes were wide with what looked like genuine amazement. "I assumed it was some obscure classical piece I wasn't familiar with." Before she could respond, the manager appeared at Williams' elbow, beaming. "Mr. Williams, I had no idea we had such talent on our staff. I hope the performance was to your satisfaction." Williams didn't take his eyes off Amelia. "It exceeded all expectations," he said. Then more quietly, so only she could hear. "You've been hiding." It wasn't a question, but a statement. And something about the way he said it, not accusatory, but almost understanding, caught her off guard. "Sometimes hiding is easier," she replied. Before she could stop herself, a curious expression crossed his face. "Yes," he said after a moment. "Sometimes it is." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, offering it to her. "The payment will be in your account within the hour. But I'd like to speak with you further if you're willing." Amelia took the card hesitantly, her mind still buzzing from the experience of playing again, from the applause, from the strange intensity in this powerful man's gaze. "Why?" she asked for the second time that evening. Williams glanced back at the piano, then at her. "Because talent like yours shouldn't be serving dinner. And because I think we might be able to help each other." He paused, then added, "Consider it at least. My number's on the card." As he turned to rejoin his party, Amelia stood frozen, the business card in her hand feeling impossibly heavy. Something had shifted tonight, something fundamental. The wall she had carefully built between her past and her present had cracked open, and now she would have to decide whether to seal it back up or step through. 3 days passed, and Amelia still hadn't called the number on Jackson Williams' business card. The small rectangle of heavyweight paper sat on her kitchen counter, catching the morning light as she made her coffee before another double shift. She picked it up for what felt like the 100th time, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. The money had appeared in her account within 30 minutes of Williams leaving the restaurant that night. $10,000, just as he'd promised. She'd stared at the notification on her phone for a long time, unable to believe it was real. Her first thought had been her mother's medical bills. Her second had been a piano. "You need to call him," her roommate Diane said, shuffling into the kitchen in fuzzy slippers. She nodded at the card in Amelia's hand. "Whatever he's offering, it's got to be better than smiling at rude customers all day." "I don't know what he's offering," Amelia replied, setting the card down. "That's what worries me." Diane raised an eyebrow. "Billionaires don't just throw money at servers for fun, honey. He heard something special in your playing. That was the problem. Amelia wasn't sure she was ready to be special again. Being special meant expectations. It meant hope. And hope was a dangerous thing when you'd had it crushed before. I'll think about it, she said. The same answer she'd given for 3 days. Her shift at Blue Harbor was different now. Word had spread about her performance, and some of the regular customers asked when she'd be playing again. The manager had pulled her aside on her first day back. Williams left a very generous tip for the entire staff, he'd said, and he mentioned that if you ever wanted to play here regularly, we could work something out. It was tempting, staying in the safe environment she knew, just adding music back into the equation. But something told her that wasn't what Williams had in mind when he gave her his card. By the end of her shift, Amelia's feet ached, and her lower back throbbed from carrying heavy trays. As she changed out of her work clothes in the staff room, she made a decision. She would call the number, not because she was ready to embrace whatever opportunity Williams might offer, but because the wondering was driving her crazy. Outside, the evening air had a crisp autumn bite. Amelia pulled her jacket tighter and found a quiet spot on a bench in the small park across from the restaurant. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number. It rang twice before a woman answered. Mr. Williams's office. Amelia hadn't expected an assistant. Oh, this is Amelia Chen from Blue Harbor Restaurant. Mr. Williams asked me to call him. Ms. Chen. Yes, Mr. Williams mentioned you might be in touch. The woman's voice warmed slightly. He's actually in a meeting right now, but he left specific instructions to set up an appointment with you as soon as possible. Would tomorrow morning at 10 work for you? Amelia had the lunch shift tomorrow, but for once in her life, she decided her curiosity was more important than her perfect attendance record. Yes, that would be fine. Excellent. The car will pick you up at 9:30. Could I get your address, please? The car? Amelia repeated, surprised. Mr. Williams insists, the assistant said smoothly. Standard protocol for all his business meetings. After providing her address and ending the call, Amelia sat on the bench for a long time, watching people hurry past. Business meeting. Is that what this was? And if so, what kind of business could a tech billionaire possibly have with a waitress who played piano? She slept poorly that night, her dreams filled with giant pianos and faceless figures in expensive suits. Morning came too quickly, and she found herself standing outside her apartment building at precisely 9:30, wearing the nicest outfit she owned, a simple black dress that she typically saved for job interviews, paired with a cardigan that had seen better days. The car that pulled up was not the flashy sports car she half expected, but a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. The driver stepped out, confirmed her name, and opened the door for her with a politeness that made her uncomfortable. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the Horizon Technologies headquarters, a modern glass and steel building that seemed to touch the clouds. Amelia's stomach knotted with anxiety as she was escorted through security and into an elevator that moved with silent efficiency. Mr. Williams is on the top floor, the receptionist had told her. Of course he was. When the elevator doors opened, Amelia was surprised by what she saw. Instead of the cold corporate space she'd imagined, the entire floor was open and airy, with plants everywhere and natural light streaming through massive windows. One wall was entirely glass, offering a breathtaking view of the city below. Amelia, a voice called, and she turned to see Jackson Williams walking toward her. He was dressed more casually than at the restaurant. Dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked younger somehow, less intimidating. Thank you for coming, he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm but not aggressive. Would you like some coffee? Tea? Coffee would be nice, she said, finding her voice. He led her through the office to a corner area with comfortable-looking furniture. A small table held a coffee service, and Williams prepared 2 cups himself, rather than asking an assistant to do it. How do you take it? He asked. Just a little milk, she replied, watching him carefully. This was not the imperious man who had commanded her to play piano for his entertainment. This was someone else entirely, and it unsettled her. Once they were seated with their coffee, Williams looked at her directly. I imagine you're wondering why you're here. The thought crossed my mind, Amelia said, surprised by her own boldness. Williams smiled slightly. Fair enough. Let me be direct then. I heard something remarkable the other night. Not just technical skill, though you have that in abundance. I heard emotion, storytelling, authenticity. Those qualities are rare even among professional musicians. Amelia shifted uncomfortably under his praise. I studied for many years, she said. Before I had to stop. May I ask why you stopped? She hesitated, then decided there was no harm in telling him. My mother got sick, cancer. I was in my second year at the conservatory. The medical bills piled up and I needed to work full-time. Eventually, I withdrew from school. Williams nodded, his expression thoughtful. And your mother? She's better now, Amelia said with a small smile. In remission for almost a year. She moved back to Taiwan to stay with my aunt during her recovery. I'm glad to hear that, he said, and she was surprised by the sincerity in his voice. He set his coffee cup down. Amelia, I'd like to offer you a job. She blinked. A job? Doing what exactly? Composing, he said simply. Horizon is expanding into media, film production, game development. We need original music. Music with heart. Music like what you played the other night. Amelia stared at him, certain she had misheard. You want me to compose music for your company? Based on one piece that I played at a restaurant? I've learned to trust my instincts, Williams replied. They rarely lead me astray, but I don't have a degree. I never finished school. There are thousands of qualified composers out there with impressive resumes and portfolios. Williams leaned forward slightly. Do you know why I started Horizon Technologies? Everyone assumes it was because I had some revolutionary idea or algorithm. The truth is, I started it because I was rejected from every tech company I applied to. No one would hire me because I dropped out of college, so I built something of my own. He shrugged. I'm not interested in credentials. I'm interested in talent and perspective. Amelia looked down at her coffee cup, her mind racing. This doesn't make sense, she said finally. People don't get opportunities like this. Not people like me. Why not? Williams asked, his tone genuinely curious. Because you're a waitress? Because you don't come from money? Because you prioritized your family over your career? He shook his head. Those aren't disqualifications, Amelia. If anything, they give you a depth of experience that most people lack. She was silent for a long moment. What exactly would this job entail? You'd work with our creative team. Start by composing for specific projects. Short films, game sequences, advertising campaigns. We'd provide the resources you need. Studio access, equipment, software. The salary is competitive. He named a figure that made Amelia's eyes widen. Plus benefits, of course. And flexible hours so you could complete your education if you wanted to. It sounded too good to be true. Why are you doing this? She asked. The question that had been burning in her mind since that night at the restaurant. You don't know me. You heard me play once. Williams was quiet for a moment, looking out at the view of the city. When he turned back to her, his expression had changed, becoming more personal somehow. My mother was a pianist, he said. Not professionally, but she was talented. She used to play for us every evening after dinner. I grew up believing that music was as necessary as air. He paused. She died when I was 16. After that, our house was silent. My father sold the piano. A shadow passed over his face. When I heard you play, it reminded me of her. Not the notes themselves, but the feeling behind them. Amelia hadn't expected such a personal revelation. Suddenly, his interest in her playing made more sense. I'm sorry about your mother, she said softly. He nodded in acknowledgement. The point is, I recognize that not everyone gets the opportunities they deserve. Sometimes talented people fall through cracks for reasons beyond their control. He met her eyes. I'd like to offer you a way back up. Amelia took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a cliff. Jump, and her life would change completely. Stay. And she would always wonder what might have been. Can I think about it? She asked finally. William smiled. Of course. Take all the time you need. He handed her another business card. This has my personal number. Call me when you decide either way. As the elevator carried her back down to the ground floor, Amelia felt lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd been carrying for years had begun to lift. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future shaped by music again. Amelia sat at the small upright piano she had just purchased, her fingers hovering above the keys. The instrument wasn't grand or expensive, a second-hand model she'd found online, but it was hers. She had used a portion of Williams's $10,000 to buy it. feeling it was somehow appropriate. Money earned through music returning to music. 2 weeks had passed since her meeting at Horizon Technologies. 2 weeks of turning Williams' offer over and over in her mind like a strange gem. Examining it from every angle, she had continued her shifts at Blue Harbor, though now with a curious sense of detachment as if she were already halfway out the door. The piano had been delivered yesterday. Diane had helped her rearrange their small living room to make space for it, grumbling good-naturedly about musician types and their priorities. "You could have used that money for a lot of things," Diane had said, watching as Amelia lovingly ran her hand along the piano's wooden frame. "I know," Amelia replied, "but this feels right." Now, in the quiet of early morning with sunlight just beginning to stream through the blinds, Amelia began to play, softly at first, then with growing confidence. Since her performance at the restaurant, something had awakened inside her. The musician she had buried beneath practical concerns and daily struggles. She played for an hour, losing herself in the music until her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Today she had an appointment at her old school, the conservatory she'd left 3 years ago. Not to re-enroll, not yet anyway, but to speak with her former professor, Dr. Reynolds. As Amelia dressed, she thought about her mother's reaction when she'd called to tell her about William's offer. There had been a long silence, then a soft sob. "Mom, are you okay?" Amelia had asked, worried. "Yes, yes," her mother had replied, her accent stronger with emotion. "These are happy tears. I have prayed every day that you would find your way back to music. I never forgave myself for being the reason you stopped." "It wasn't your fault," Amelia had insisted. "Life happens. We deal with it." "Yes, but at what cost?" her mother had asked. "You gave up your dream for me. Now maybe you can take it back." The conservatory looked exactly as Amelia remembered. The imposing stone facade, the wide steps leading to heavy wooden doors, the sound of music drifting from practice rooms. She felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with regret as she climbed those steps, remembering the eager student she had been. Dr. Reynolds was waiting in her office, surrounded by towering bookshelves and framed concert programs. Her hair had more gray than Amelia remembered, but her sharp eyes were the same. "Amelia Chen," she said, rising to embrace her former student. "It's been too long." They spoke for nearly an hour, Amelia explaining everything that had happened, her mother's illness, leaving school, the years of waiting tables, and finally, the strange twist of fate with Jackson Williams. "And now you're not sure what to do," Dr. Reynolds said, leaning back in her chair. "Exactly," Amelia nodded. "It seems too good to be true. And even if it is true, am I ready?" "I've barely played in 3 years," Dr. Reynolds smiled. "The fact that you can still play as you did after such a long break tells me everything I need to know about your talent." "It's still there, Amelia. It was always there. But composing professionally, for films and games, I never finished my education." "Education doesn't end when you leave school," Dr. Reynolds said gently. "Life teaches us too, often the hardest and most valuable lessons." She paused. "May I speak frankly?" Amelia nodded. "When you were here, you were technically brilliant, one of the most skilled students I'd ever taught. But there was something missing in your compositions. A depth of emotion, perhaps. The kind that only comes from living, from experiencing joy and pain." She leaned forward. "From what you've told me about your recent performance, I suspect you've found that depth now." "So you think I should take the job?" Amelia asked. "I think opportunities like this are rare, and I think you've earned it, through your talent and your sacrifice." Dr. Reynolds stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. After rifling through some folders, she pulled out several sheets of paper. "Here," she said, handing them to Amelia. "Your final composition before you left us. I kept it. Read my notes." Amelia looked down at her old work covered in Dr. Reynolds's familiar red ink. At the bottom, a comment stood out. "Technically perfect, but where is your heart? Where is your story?" "I remember being frustrated by this feedback," Amelia said softly. "And now?" Dr. Reynolds asked. "Now I understand it." She looked up at her former professor. "I have a story now." "Then perhaps it's time to tell it," Dr. Reynolds said with a gentle smile. "Through your music." As Amelia left the conservatory, her phone rang. It was Leeway from the restaurant. "Hey, where are you?" "You're late for your shift," he said, sounding concerned. Amelia froze. In all her contemplation, she had completely forgotten she was scheduled to work today. "I'm so sorry," she said. I had an appointment and lost track of time. I'll be there as soon as I can. The manager's pretty upset, Leeway warned. There's a big party coming in, and we're short-staffed. Tell him I'm on my way, Amelia said, already looking for a taxi. When she arrived at Blue Harbor 20 minutes later, she could see the chaos through the front windows. The restaurant was packed, servers rushing between tables with harried expressions. The manager stood at the host stand, his face tight with stress. When he saw Amelia, his expression darkened. "You're 40 minutes late," he said. "That's unacceptable." "I know, and I'm truly sorry," Amelia replied. "It won't happen again." "You're right, it won't," he said coldly. "Because this is your final warning. One more mistake and you're done here. Now get changed and start on section 3. They've been waiting for drink orders for 10 minutes. As Amelia hurried to the back to change into her uniform, a strange calm settled over her. A month ago, the threat of losing this job would have sent her into a panic. Now it felt almost like liberation. She worked her shift with mechanical efficiency, smiling at customers, taking orders, delivering food. But her mind was elsewhere, in a studio at Horizon Technologies, creating music that told her story. Near the end of her shift, a familiar face appeared at the host stand. Jackson Williams, looking casual in jeans and a light jacket, spoke briefly with the host before being seated at a small table in her section. Amelia approached, feeling suddenly nervous. "Good evening, Mr. Williams. I didn't expect to see you here again." He smiled up at her. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I might check if my favorite pianist was performing tonight. Just serving, I'm afraid," she replied. "Pity." He studied her face for a moment. "Have you given any thought to my offer?" Amelia took a deep breath. "I have. A lot of thought, actually." Williams nodded. "And?" Before she could answer, the manager appeared beside them, his professional smile firmly in place. "Mr. Williams, what a pleasure to have you back. Is everything to your satisfaction?" "Everything's fine, thank you," Williams replied, his tone polite but dismissive. The manager hovered a moment longer. "Amelia, when you've taken Mr. Williams's order, table 6 needs their check." After he walked away, Williams raised an eyebrow. "Is he always so micromanaging?" "Yes," Amelia said with a small laugh. Then, making a decision, she sat down in the empty chair across from Williams. "I'd like to accept your offer." His face brightened. "Excellent. When can you start?" "That's the thing," Amelia said, glancing around the restaurant that had been her workplace for the past 3 years. "I think I need to give notice here. 2 weeks at least." "It's only fair." Williams looked surprised. "You're worried about being fair to a place that clearly undervalues you?" Amelia considered this. "Maybe it's not about them. Maybe it's about who I want to be, the kind of person who does things the right way even when it's not required." A slow smile spread across Williams' face. "I knew I was right about you," he said quietly. 2 weeks is fine. We'll use the time to set up your workspace, get all the paperwork in order." He pulled out his phone. "Have dinner with me and we can discuss the details." "I can't," Amelia said, gesturing to her uniform. "I'm working." Williams looked around the restaurant, then back at her with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Are you sure?" "Because I'm thinking about talking to the owner, who happens to be an old friend of mine, about how his manager treated a valuable employee who was late one time in 3 years. Amelia's eyes widened. "You wouldn't?" "I absolutely would," Williams replied, typing something on his phone. "Consider it your first official act as a Horizon employee, having dinner with your new boss to discuss your future." 20 minutes later, after a brief and intense conversation between Williams and the owner, who had appeared from his office for the first time in months, Amelia found herself sitting across from her new employer at a small Italian restaurant 2 blocks away, still trying to process the whirlwind that her life had become. "To new beginnings," Williams said, raising his water glass in a toast. Amelia raised her glass as well, a smile tugging at her lips. "To new beginnings," she echoed, feeling as though she had finally found the right notes after years of playing the wrong song. 1 year later, the recording studio was silent as the last notes faded away. Amelia sat at the grand piano, her hands still resting on the keys, her eyes closed as she savored the feeling of completion. Behind the glass, the sound engineer gave her a thumbs up. "That was perfect," he said through the intercom. "I think we've got it." Amelia nodded, a tired smile spreading across her face. She'd been in the studio since early morning, recording the final pieces for the soundtrack of Horizon's first major film production. 3 days of intense focus, countless takes, and now finally, it was done. As she gathered her sheet music, the studio door opened and Jackson Williams walked in, dressed in his usual casual but expensive attire. "How's our musical genius today?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Exhausted," Amelia replied honestly. "But happy," Williams smiled. "The director called me an hour ago. He's over the moon about the rough cuts with your score. Says it transforms the whole film." Amelia felt a flush of pride. The past year had been the most challenging and rewarding of her life. She'd gone from serving dinner to creating music that would be heard by millions. The learning curve had been steep. Composing for film was different from the classical training she'd received, but she'd thrown herself into it completely. "The premiere is in 3 weeks," Williams continued. "You'll need something spectacular to wear." Amelia looked down at her jeans and comfortable sweater. "I suppose my usual studio outfit won't cut it?" "Hardly," Williams laughed. "It's Hollywood. Red carpet, cameras everywhere. You're not just the composer, Amelia. You're part of the story now, the waitress who stunned the billionaire with her music and went on to score an award contender film." "When you put it that way, it sounds like a movie itself," she said, shaking her head in disbelief at how her life had changed. "Sometimes reality is more surprising than fiction," Williams replied. He glanced at his watch. "I've got a meeting upstairs. Dinner later this week to celebrate?" "Definitely," Amelia said. "But not tonight. I promised my mom I'd call, and then I'm collapsing into bed for about 12 hours. After Williams left, Amelia packed up her belongings and headed out. The Horizon building had become familiar over the past year, but she still sometimes paused to take in the fact that she worked here, that she had an office with a view and her name on the door. Outside, the early evening air was cool against her face. Rather than heading straight to her apartment, a new one, in a better neighborhood, though still modest by her choice, she found herself walking toward Blue Harbor Restaurant. She hadn't been back since leaving her job there, though she'd kept in touch with Li Wei, who had recently been promoted to head waiter. The restaurant looked the same from the outside. Amelia hesitated before pushing the door open, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and distance. The host greeted her with a polite smile, not recognizing her with her new haircut and confident posture. "Table for one?" he asked. "Actually," Amelia said, "I was hoping to see if Li Wei is working tonight." The host's expression changed to one of recognition. "Oh, you're Amelia. Li Wei's mentioned you. He's here, I'll get him for you." "A minute." Later, Li Wei emerged from the back, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Amelia," he exclaimed, giving her a warm hug. "What a surprise. Li told me you were coming by sometime, but I didn't expect it to be tonight." "Li?" Amelia asked, raising an eyebrow. Li Wei blushed slightly. "My girlfriend. We've been dating for a few months now." "That's wonderful," Amelia said, genuinely happy for her friend. "Are you staying for dinner? I can get you my best table." Amelia shook her head. "Not tonight. I just finished the film score and I'm completely drained. But I wanted to drop this off." She handed him an envelope. "Premiere tickets for you and Li. Front row at the after-party, too." Li Wei's eyes widened as he looked at the gold-embossed invitation. "Seriously, this is... wow, thank you. I wouldn't be where I am without this place," Amelia said, glancing around the restaurant that had been such a significant chapter in her life. Her eyes landed on the piano in the corner, where a young man was playing softly for the dinner crowd. "How's the new pianist?" "Good," Li Wei said. "Not as good as you, though." As they chatted, catching up on the past months, Amelia felt a sense of closure. This part of her journey had ended, but it had led her to where she needed to be. Back at her apartment, Amelia kicked off her shoes and made herself a cup of tea before settling on the couch with her laptop. She opened the video call application and dialed her mother in Taiwan. Her mother's face appeared on screen, her eyes crinkling with happiness. "Amelia, I've been waiting for your call. How did the recording go?" "It's finished, Mom. All done. I'm so proud of you, her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. Your father would have been too. They talked for nearly an hour, Amelia describing the intricate process of matching music to film scenes, her mother hanging on every word. When they finally said goodbye, Amelia promised to fly her mother in for the premiere. It would be the first time they'd seen each other in person since before the pandemic. Sleep came easily that night, deep and dreamless. When Amelia woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through her bedroom window. She had nowhere to be. Williams had insisted she take a few days off after the intensive recording session. She made coffee and carried it to the upright piano that still held pride of place in her living room, despite the fact that she now had access to state-of-the-art instruments at work. This piano had been her first step back into music, and it held a special place in her heart. Amelia began to play, not the complex compositions she created for work, but something new and simple, a melody that had been forming in her mind for weeks. It was a personal piece, not meant for any film or project, just for herself. As she played, she thought about the strange path that had led her here. If she hadn't been assigned to Williams's table that night, if she hadn't spilled coffee on his shirt, if he hadn't noticed her hands, any small change in those events might have resulted in a completely different life. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Her phone chimed with a text. It was from Williams. Just heard from the studio executives. They want to offer you a 3-film contract. Call me when you're up. Amelia smiled at the message but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she continued, playing, developing the melody, letting it grow and change. There would be time for business later. Right now, this moment of pure creation was hers alone. Later that afternoon, Amelia found herself walking through her old neighborhood. The familiar streets held memories at every corner. The grocery store where she'd carefully counted pennies for each purchase. The laundromat where she'd graded papers from her brief attempt at giving piano lessons. The coffee shop where she'd sometimes treated herself on paydays. She stopped at a small music shop she'd visited often, just to look at the instruments she couldn't afford. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Gallo, was arranging sheet music behind the counter. He looked up when the bell above the door jingled, his face breaking into a wide smile when he recognized her. "Amelia, it's been too long," he said warmly. "Hello, Mr. Gallo," she replied, touched that he remembered her. "I saw your name in the newspaper," he said proudly. "Composing for that big Hollywood movie. I told everyone who came in, that girl used to visit my shop." Amelia laughed. "I was just dreaming back then." "Sometimes dreams come true," Mr. Gallo said with a wink, "if you work hard enough. And get lucky," Amelia added. "Luck finds those who are prepared for it," he replied sagely. As Amelia browsed through the sheet, music, her eye caught a familiar cover. The same Chopin nocturne she had been practicing the day she received the call about her mother's diagnosis, the day her life had taken its first dramatic turn. On impulse, she bought it. "Starting a collection?" Mr. Gallo asked as he rang up her purchase. "Something like that," Amelia replied. "A reminder of the journey." That evening, as the sun set over the city, Amelia sat at her piano with the Chopin piece before her. She began to play, her fingers finding the familiar patterns. The music filled her apartment, haunting, beautiful, tinged with melancholy but ultimately hopeful. When she finished, she reached for her phone and called Williams. "About that 3-film contract," she said when he answered. "I'd like to discuss adding a scholarship program to my terms." "A scholarship program?" Williams sounded intrigued. "For music students who have to leave school due to financial hardship or family emergencies," Amelia explained. "To give them a way back when they're ready." There was a pause, then Williams chuckled softly. "You continue to surprise me, Amelia Chen." "Is that a yes?" "It's a, let's figure out how to make it happen," he replied. "I think it's brilliant. Full circle, isn't it?" "That's the idea, Amelia," said her gaze drifting to the window, to the city beyond, to all the unknown musicians whose songs had yet to be heard. "Everyone deserves a second,